Welcome back investors to a new video. Today's company is not flashy at all. No AI software story, no consumer brand, no visible product sitting in front of you. Yet it quietly sits inside one of the biggest structural themes unfolding across the world today, the electrification of everything. Think about almost every major growth theme today. Artificial intelligence, data centers, electric vehicles, railways, factories, renewable energy. All of them ultimately need one thing: electricity. And behind electricity is an infrastructure layer that most people never think about. The layer that actually moves power from one place to another. Most people imagine electricity just appears in homes when they flip a switch. But in reality, India's power network works much like a giant national water distribution system. Imagine a massive reservoir where water originates. That reservoir is similar to power plants such as NTPC, Tata Power, Adani Power, and hundreds of solar, wind and hydro projects spread across the country. This is where electricity is first generated. But there is a problem. Just as water cannot efficiently travel hundreds of kilometers through low pressure pipes, electricity cannot efficiently travel long distances at low voltage. Losses become too high. Which is why before electricity begins its journey across the country, it passes through a transformer. Transformers do not create electricity or store electricity. They simply change voltage levels. Typically, electricity generated at around 11 kilovolts is stepped up to nearly 400 kilovolts because higher voltage means lower transmission losses. Think of this like a powerful pump increasing water pressure before sending water into a long-distance pipeline. Once voltage is raised, electricity moves through India's transmission highway. Thousands of transmission towers, thousands of kilometers of transmission lines. Companies like Power Grid Corporation, state transmission utilities, and private operators collectively move electricity across the nation. Eventually, that electricity reaches cities and industrial clusters. But 400 kilovolts cannot be used directly, so voltage is reduced in stages from 400 kilovolts to 220 kilovolts, then 66 kilovolts, then 11 kilovolts, and finally around 230 volts. In water terms, this is similar to pressure control stations gradually reducing pressure before water reaches your home. Only then can electricity safely power homes, factories, railways, EV charging stations, and data centers. The power plant is the reservoir, the step-up transformer is the high-pressure pump, the transmission grid is the high-pressure pipeline, the step-down transformer is the pressure control station, and the consumer is the final tap. That is the entire journey of electricity. Now here comes the most important part. Every step-up transformer, every step-down transformer, and every transformer sitting in between depends on one critical component hidden deep inside: copper windings. Without those windings, there is no magnetic field. Without the magnetic field, there is no voltage conversion. Without voltage conversion, there is no transformer. And without transformers, electricity cannot travel efficiently through the grid. So the actual supply chain looks like this: power plant to transformer to grid to transformer to consumer. But if we zoom one layer deeper, another supply chain emerges. Copper producers to today's company, to transformer manufacturers, to power infrastructure, to end users. And it is precisely at this critical junction between raw copper and finished transformers that our company has quietly built its position. So the company which we will discuss today is KSH International Limited. KSH International is a 45-year-old company and one of the most important players in India's winding wire industry. It is India's third largest winding wire manufacturer and the country's largest exporter in this segment. The company exports to 24 countries. Current installed capacity stands at 41,045 metric tons. Post-Supa Phase 2 capacity is expected to rise to 59,045 metric tons, effectively doubling from roughly 29,000 metric tons over the expansion cycle. The company serves around 120 domestic and global OEM customers. More than 90% of revenue comes from repeat customers. Management indicates repeat business levels above 95%. 5 of the top 10 customers have been associated with the company for more than 10 years, and the oldest customer relationship spans nearly 40 years. The top 10 customers contribute roughly 50% of total business. At first glance, what KSH manufactures sounds simple: copper conductors, magnet winding wires, transformer conductors. Nothing particularly exciting. But the reality is very different. Because the products used inside modern transformers are not ordinary copper wires. Think about the conditions inside a large transformer: massive current, high voltage, continuous heat, and an expectation that the equipment should operate reliably for decades. A small efficiency loss today can translate into enormous energy losses over the life of the transformer, which is why transformer manufacturers cannot simply buy generic copper wire. They need highly engineered conductors specifically designed for electrical performance, insulation integrity, thermal management, and long operating life. And this is where KSH starts becoming interesting. The company does not sell copper, it sells engineering applied to copper. Copper itself is a commodity, but engineering capability is not. KSH purchases copper rods and cathodes and transforms them into highly specialized electrical conductors. The value addition comes from manufacturing precision, insulation technology, electrical efficiency, thermal performance, quality control, and decades of accumulated know-how. The company operates on a make-to-order model. Customer pricing and copper procurement are linked to the same LME benchmark through a back-to-back arrangement. As a result, copper price movements are largely passed through, and KSH primarily earns fabrication and engineering value add. Copper ore is processed into 99.99% LME grade A cathodes, then further converted into copper rods. KSH enters the value chain after this stage. From there, raw rods undergo wire drawing and flattening, insulation and enameling, continuous transposition, interlocking, paper wrapping, curing and quality testing to create highly specialized conductors used in transformers, HVDC systems, motors, and power infrastructure. So KSH is fundamentally a midstream value-added copper processing business. It does not mine copper or produce cathodes. It transforms commodity copper into precision-engineered electrical conductors that sit inside critical infrastructure. Among all the products manufactured by KSH, one product stands above everything else: CTC, Continuously Transposed Conductors. CTC is not simply a thicker copper wire. Instead of using one large conductor, multiple insulated copper strands are arranged together in a highly engineered configuration and continuously transposed along the entire length. The objective is simple: improve efficiency, reduce losses, and enable transformers to handle larger loads more reliably. As transformer sizes increase, CTC becomes increasingly important, especially in large power transformers, extra high voltage systems, and HVDC applications. That is why CTC is considered the gold standard conductor technology for large transformers globally. But manufacturing CTC is far more complex than manufacturing standard winding wires. A standard conductor may require only two major manufacturing stages. CTC can require 5 to 6 highly precise manufacturing stages. Every strand must be insulated, positioned, and transposed with extreme precision while maintaining tight tolerances across the entire conductor length. Even a small deviation can affect transformer efficiency, which is why only a handful of players globally can manufacture CTC at scale. And that manufacturing complexity is where the moat begins, not through branding, not through marketing, but through manufacturing capability built over decades. Whenever a business operates in a niche segment, the next question investors should ask is simple. If the opportunity is so attractive, why aren't dozens of competitors entering? The answer lies in trust. A large transformer can remain operational for 20, 30, or even 40 years. Many of these transformers sit inside power grids, renewable parks, railway networks, industrial facilities, and other critical infrastructure. If a transformer fails, the consequences are extremely expensive, which means OEMs cannot afford experimentation. This is why approvals matter so much. Products must go through testing, qualification procedures, performance validation, reliability assessments, and customer audits. Sometimes qualification cycles can take anywhere between 3 to 7 years. And investors, we also find these small cap, micro cap, and SME opportunities at an early stage through our research services, Emerging Titans and Tiny Titans. Emerging Titans is mainly built for mainboard small and mid cap companies, while Tiny Titans focuses purely on SME listed stocks. Across both services, you receive detailed research reports, entry and exit strategy, allocation guidance, and regular updates. So if you want to be part of our research community, you can visit valueeducator.com or check the link in the description. We follow our sprint strategy framework to discover such niche stocks with strong potential. Now let's get back to our video. And this is where KSH has spent decades building its moat. The company is approved by some of the largest transformer manufacturers globally: Hitachi Energy, GE Vernova, Siemens Energy, BHEL, CG Power, Bharat Bijli, and Toshiba. The moat becomes even stronger when we look at how approvals are obtained. PGCIL approvals involve years of testing, audits, field validation, and qualification. That is why approval cycles can stretch 5 to 7 years, making qualified suppliers extremely difficult to replace. One simple way to understand KSH's positioning is by looking at EBITDA per ton across the industry. Players focused on standard winding wires generally operate at lower EBITDA per ton levels, while companies with greater exposure to specialized conductors tend to generate superior economics. KSH's strategic focus clearly lies toward the higher value end of that spectrum, and the numbers reflect that shift. Production volumes increased from 17,645 metric tons in FY23 to 21,495 metric tons in FY24, 23,324 metric tons in FY25, and 28,168 metric tons in FY26. At the same time, EBITDA per ton improved from 33,244 in FY24 to 52,536 in FY25 and further to 67,625 in FY26. Q4 FY26 reached approximately 74,018 per ton. This is important because both volumes and profitability per ton are improving simultaneously. EBITDA per ton is also the right metric to track because copper prices are largely passed through. Revenue can rise or fall depending on LME copper prices, but EBITDA per ton shows the actual fabrication value KSH earns from every ton processed. It removes commodity price noise and reflects the true economics of the business. The opportunity also looks attractive from a total addressable market perspective. The global copper magnet wire market itself is estimated at roughly $27.8 billion and continues to grow alongside electrification, renewable energy, industrial automation, and EV adoption. KSH participates in some of the highest value-added parts of that market. The revenue mix shift tells an interesting story. Specialized products contributed nearly 80% of revenue in fiscal year 23, but that share has moved to around 75% today and could trend closer to 60% over time. Despite specialized products generating nearly 3 times the EBITDA per ton of standard products, EBITDA per ton has increased from around 28,000 rupees in FY23 to nearly 65,000 rupees today. The reason is simple. While standard products are driving volumes, KSH is moving deeper into higher kilovolt transformers, exports, and HVDC applications, where value addition is significantly higher. Standard products are driving scale, while specialized products are driving profitability. The biggest opportunity emerging today is the demand-supply imbalance in CTC conductors. India's CTC demand today is estimated at roughly 40,000 tons. By FY27 and FY28, this demand could move closer to 70,000 to 75,000 tons. And over the longer term, management believes Indian demand itself could potentially reach nearly 100,000 to 120,000 tons. For a niche industry, that implies demand could nearly triple over time. And this is not being driven by one temporary cycle. It is being driven by structural electrification. In fact, demand has become so strong that India was importing nearly 1,000 tons of CTC every month because domestic supply was simply not enough. That is around 12,000 tons a year of import dependence. And when demand grows faster than qualified capacity, established players benefit. But the opportunity becomes even larger when we move one step higher in the transformer value chain. And that brings us to HVDC, high voltage direct current transmission. Traditionally, electricity transmission has largely happened through AC systems. But as transmission distances increase and renewable energy projects become larger, HVDC is becoming increasingly important because over very long distances, it can be significantly more efficient. As countries continue building large transmission corridors, renewable energy parks, and interstate power infrastructure, HVDC projects are expected to play a much bigger role. Which means demand for HVDC-compatible transformers also rises. And those transformers require highly specialized conductors. This is where KSH occupies a unique position. And PGCIL's approval acts as one of the strongest validations of KSH's moat. In the 765 kV category, there are multiple qualified players. But in HVDC grade CTC conductors, KSH currently remains the only domestic supplier approved by PGCIL. That distinction is important because HVDC represents one of the most technically demanding categories within transformer conductors. Not everyone can participate even if demand rises. Another interesting aspect of this story is that demand is not being driven only by power infrastructure. Completely different industries are now indirectly supporting conductor demand. Take artificial intelligence for example. Most investors focus on chips and software, but every AI data center requires enormous power infrastructure, including transformers, substations, and distribution equipment. which means AI indirectly drives demand across the transformer ecosystem. The same applies to electric vehicles. EV adoption increases electricity demand, expands charging infrastructure, and ultimately requires more transformers across the grid. KSH also places EV traction motors, EV charging infrastructure, and high voltage 800 volts plus architectures inside the addressable opportunity set. EV adoption increases electricity demand, expands charging infrastructure, and ultimately requires more transformers across the grid. And then there are the traditional demand drivers: renewable energy, railway electrification, grid modernization, industrial expansion. All of them ultimately require transformers. And transformers ultimately require conductors, which is where KSH sits. The long-term demand outlook is very strong. Power transmission investment is expected to be about 9.16 trillion rupees through March 2032. India's non-fossil fuel capacity is projected to rise from 217.5 gigawatts to 613 gigawatts by FY32. And the global winding wire market is forecasted to grow at a 7.77% CAGR through 2032, reaching approximately 27.04 billion US dollars. Transformer manufacturing capacity itself is also expanding rapidly. Industry capacity is expected to move from roughly 110 gigavolt amperes currently to nearly 300 gigavolt amperes by fiscal year 28. That is close to a 2.7 times increase. When you put all of this together, renewables, AI, EVs, transmission investments, and transformer expansion all point toward one common requirement: more specialized conductors. The company is also responding aggressively. Installed capacity currently stands at 41,045 metric tons. Post SUPA Phase 2, capacity will rise to 59,045 metric tons. That represents roughly 18,000 metric tons of incremental capacity addition. Management has also indicated that another 10,000 metric tons of capacity can potentially be added beyond current plans if demand remains strong. This provides meaningful optionality for future growth. Management has also indicated that FY26 volume growth of roughly 21% provides a reasonable base reference for future growth expectations. With additional capacity becoming available, the company sees the ability to sustain healthy volume expansion going forward. Capacity cannot be added overnight here. Equipment lead times are 8 to 12 months, qualification cycles can take 5 to 7 years, and CTC manufacturing itself is significantly more complex than standard winding wires. The next lever is backward integration. Over time, management believes in-house rod manufacturing and scrap recycling can improve EBITDA per ton by roughly 2,000 to 3,000. Instead of selling scrap externally and buying fresh rods, more value can be captured internally. Till now, KSH purchased copper rods externally. Now the company is moving one step upstream through its proposed 60,000 tons per annum copper rod facility. Instead of depending entirely on external suppliers, KSH will increasingly manufacture rods internally using copper cathodes. This helps improve supply security, operational flexibility, and manufacturing efficiency. It also matters because copper remains the company's single largest raw material. Historically, supplier concentration has been meaningful. The largest supplier contributed 67.86% of purchases in FY24 and 48.07% in FY25. Backward integration can gradually reduce that dependence. KSH's revenue mix also tells an important story. Specialized products contribute roughly 75% to 77% of revenue. Standard products contribute around 23% to 25%. EBITDA per ton is an important metric here. Copper itself is largely pass-through. The real value lies in processing, fabrication, and engineering, which means the company's economics are driven more by value addition than by copper prices. Compared with peers such as Ramratna and Precision Wires, KSH benefits from a higher share of specialized conductors and therefore stronger EBITDA per ton. Specialized conductors can generate roughly 3 times the EBITDA per ton of standard winding wires, which is one reason KSH's profitability profile stands out within the industry. And this is where another interesting opportunity emerges. PEEK insulated wires, polyether ether ketone. Management describes PEEK as the highest value product in the company's portfolio. The product is targeted toward next-generation EV architectures, particularly 800 volts plus systems and advanced traction motors. KSH has an exclusive licensing agreement with HPW Metalwork GmbH of Germany for this technology. Production capacity is expected to be ready by the end of Q2 fiscal year 27. Meaningful commercial contribution is expected from fiscal year 28 to fiscal year 29 onwards. Long term, around 5% to 10% of total capacity could potentially be allocated toward automotive, EV, and PEEK related opportunities. And if management's expectations play out, PEEK could potentially command even higher EBITDA per ton than CTC. So future growth is also about moving further up the value chain. Now let's talk about exports. KSH exports to 24 countries globally. Historically, exports contributed roughly 30% to 40% of revenue. However, management intentionally reduced the mix closer to 30% because domestic opportunities became more attractive and capacity was constrained. Despite that, export revenue grew by approximately 92% year-on-year in Q4 FY26. Nearly 100% of export revenue comes from specialized magnet winding wires, primarily CTC products. The key export markets include the United States, UAE, Kuwait, Romania, and Saudi Arabia. The United States alone accounted for roughly 9% of total revenue during the last fiscal year. And this is particularly interesting because it also ties into the China Plus One theme. Specialized winding wire capacity remains limited in several developed markets, which creates opportunities for qualified Indian suppliers like KSH. There is also a near-term industry tailwind worth mentioning. Imported specialized conductors currently attract duties that make imports less competitive versus domestic production. Combined with strong demand growth and limited domestic supply, this further strengthens the opportunity for established Indian manufacturers. The customer profile is also becoming more diversified. The top 10 customer contribution has reduced from 58.99% in FY23 to 57.10% in FY24, then 52.54% in FY25, and further to 50.80% in Q3 FY26. The top two customers contributed 10.18% and 8.83% respectively during FY25. That still shows concentration, but the trend is clearly improving. Now let's briefly discuss risks. KSH operates largely on a make-to-order model. Qualification cycles are long, customer approvals matter, and revenue growth ultimately depends on successful execution by transformer manufacturers and broader power infrastructure spending. Another commonly discussed risk is OEM backward integration. Some transformer manufacturers have explored manufacturing CTC internally. However, management believes large-scale backward integration remains difficult because winding wire manufacturing is a continuous 24/7 process, requires meaningful scale, high utilization, and extensive qualification approvals. Globally, very few transformer OEMs are meaningfully backward integrated, and even where backward integration exists, customers often continue dual sourcing because reliability and supply security remain critical. So when you step back and look at the entire picture, the investment thesis becomes quite clear. KSH is not just a winding wire company. It is not simply a copper processing company. It is a critical enabler of electrification itself. It participates in power transmission, power distribution, renewable energy, railways, industrial infrastructure, AI, data centers, HVDC projects, and EV ecosystems. Every major growth trend discussed in this video eventually comes back to one thing: specialized conductors. And KSH sits right in the middle of that ecosystem. If the company executes its capacity expansion, scales backward integration, improves EBITDA per ton, enhances their product mix, and successfully commercializes peak wires, then KSH's next phase could look very different from its past. Identify such small cap, micro cap, and SME companies early through our research services, Emerging Titans and Tiny Titans. Emerging Titans is mainly built for mainboard small and mid cap companies, while Tiny Titans focuses purely on SME listed stocks. Across both services, you receive detailed research reports, entry and exit strategy, allocation guidance, and regular updates. So if you want to be part of our research community, you can visit valueeducator.com or check the link in the description. We follow our sprint strategy framework to discover such niche stocks with strong potential. That's it for today's video. If you found this detailed breakdown useful, then like the video, subscribe to the channel, and comment below sprint if you like the detailed research. We will meet again next Saturday with another video at 11 AM.